not only have I, gained wisdom, but I've also gained perspective. And I think about, all of the relationships that I was in, prior to where I am now. I saw them through the lens of what was done to me. And so now sitting here looking back, I no longer say, why was this done to me? Why did they do this to me? Now I find myself asking, how did they end up there? What happened to them? Because I had to stop and realize, just as I was a broken woman, they were broken men. And I had to learn in this society, especially, boys at a very young age are taught not to cry. They're taught to be strong. They're taught to be the provider, to be the protector, to be hard, to be tough. And so I had to realize, we don't have there's no safe place for them. There's no safe place. And I realized, in my relationships that I look back and I have to take accountability for the fact that many times I did not provide a safe space because I was so focused on what I wasn't getting and how I was hurting that I didn't stop and realize, that this man is not just a provider and protector. Like he's more than an object. And I think many times we see men as just objects. Just provide and just to protect. That's it. We don't, I failed to see their humanity. I was so quick to count what they did wrong and what they didn't get right and what they could be. And so many times, when you stop and I had to stop and I had to think, and it just brought so much light to realize that if you have a man who has grown up his whole life being told to be a provider, to be a protector, to not cry and all of those different things, you have to stop and realize, wait a minute, then where does his grief go? Where does his anger go? Where does his sadness go? Where does his disappointment go? Where does that go? Where's his safe place to land? Where does that go? And so as I began to really process that and really gain new perspective on that, it made sense to why I found myself in these relationships with men and there was infidelity, there was self-destruction, there was so much toxicity because I didn't realize that men hurt too, but they don't express their hurt in the way that we can. And I realized that there was a lot more grace given to women than it was given to men. I gave more grace to other women, in my toxicity. When I would have my friends, they would tell me about what was going on in their relationships, and I always gave advice through my broken lens. And I realized that men need grace. And so as I sit here now, I look back over the men that were in my life and I'm just like, God, give them grace. I just speak God's grace over their life, their grace and their mercy. Because I realized, I said, even though that door is shut and that door is closed, and even though I may no longer be in love with them, I still love them because God loves them and they're still a soul. And I find myself having this compassion for them. And by saying that doesn't mean that it removes the accountability, because just as how I had to be accountable, of course, men, they have to be accountable for their actions. But I think it's this whole us against them type thing. And that wasn't a part of God's design. God designed companionship. He designed for that to be. He didn't design for us to be at war with one another. And so as I began to do that, my heart softened and it made forgiveness a whole lot easier because I just realized they were broken just the same way that I was. And I look back, like I said, and they just need that grace. I give them that grace and I give them that mercy, and I still continue to pray for them.